back here on Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. Each and every weekday, 8A to 11A Eastern, powered by Modelo. With Ari Timken, I'm James Westling. Super pumped to have Brad Crawford, the college football writer for CBS Sports, who also dabbles in a little pickleball, film, and crypto. Let's go. Hey, Brad, good morning.
Hey, good to see you guys, man.
We appreciate your time, number one. There's a lot to unpack with the momentum towards a 2014 playoff with the coaches, but then there's also calendar changes. You've got to figure out something with the conference title games. You've got Army-Navy locked into a certain Saturday every season. So break it down for us. What is the latest?
Yeah, major changes expected, at least in 2027, I would say. Obviously, the Big Ten and SEC right now, fellas, are the two conferences that are kind of going head-to-head on this expanded playoff. AFCA coaches, though, however, they almost voted unanimously to expand this thing to 24 teams. And we're at 12 right now. The SEC has long been a fan of 16. The Big Ten obviously wants 24. And I think if we do expand this playoff to 24 teams, the only way it's going to work out for the SEC and Big Ten is if you see maybe one auto bid from the G6 and then 23 at-large selections from the CFP committee. That way you have a ton of Big Ten and SEC teams in that 24-team bracket. But, you know, getting the calendar changes, Dan Lanning has said he wants to see the season end January 1st. Ryan Day wants it to end before the singular transfer portal window opens in January. And I think a lot of coaches share that same sentiment.
You know, there's been a lot of discussion around this on how much the 2014 playoff would reduce the regular season. Brad, what's your opinion on that?
I don't like the idea of ending conference championship weekend, but I think it's a necessity if you add 12 more games to the postseason and a whole nother round of playoff action. You would have, instead of 4 teams getting byes, obviously you'd have 8, and then you'd have 16 teams that are playing during conference championship weekend to kind of start the CFP bracket. I know there's been financial feasibility surveys from all these major conferences and commissioners. Right now, Conference Championship Weekend in the Big Ten and SEC is a huge moneymaker. Those are two of the most watched regular season games every year in college football. The major issue is if you add another round of playoff games, they see that as more money. So there's coaches, too, in both leagues. Obviously, I haven't heard as much from the Big 12 and ACC, but there are coaches in the Big Ten and SEC who think it's actually not beneficial to play in the conference championship game. They'd rather have that extra week of preparation before the postseason begins. We saw it kind of happen last year with Alabama getting sort of dump trucked by Georgia and Atlanta and then kind of stumbling out the gate before winning that first playoff game and then losing to IU. But I do think if we expand to 24 teams, conference championship weekend is going to be kaput.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Brad, did I hear you say a 24-team field with one group of 6 and the others at large, or
that's the preferred model right now. Yeah, a lot of coaches are kind of going back and forth on that, but it sounds like that would be the model if we do move to 24 teams.
Wow, and that has to be Big Ten SEC driven, correct?
Oh, it has to be. Yeah, I mean Greg Sankey, he's wanted 6 automatic bids in a 16-team playoff for the SEC, and so I think if we have a 24, you're obviously going to have that one G6 team. But the biggest issue for me is why even have top 25 rankings anymore if just about every ranked team is going to make this 24-team bracket. We already see a bunch of first-round games that are lopsided and sort of the 10, 11, 12 seeds are always diluted. We're going to have even more of those lopsided games if we move to 24 teams.
You know, I'm curious if there are unintended consequences of a 24-team playoff, and is this too quickly? Should we wait and see what the data looks like on a 12-team playoff over multiple years?
I think we should. I mean, the first 2 years of the 12-team playoff, I don't know about you guys, but it's been a ratings bonanza.
Yeah.
It's been really fun to watch. We had a double-digit seed last year in Miami, win 3 games and get to the final, beating 3 teams as underdogs. That was very impressive, but, I just think it's sort of giving other teams and coaches a fake seat at the table. If you're a Michigan State coach or a South Carolina head coach or a Missouri head coach, well, now you can finish 8-4, you can make the playoff, and then you get your playoff bonus in your contract. So we're talking about a lot of coaches who are going to have longevity by just having 1 or 2 good seasons every 5 years.
Brad Crawford's joining us from CBS here on Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. Do you see a college football playoff that is 16 teams before 24, or do you think eventually it just jumps from 20 from the current 12 to 24?
I think Greg Sankey of the SEC would prefer it move to 16 first and then sort of play it out a couple of years, see how that works. But I think we're going straight from 12 to 24. You know, the ACC and Big 12, the decision makers there, they weren't necessarily on board last summer with a 2014 playoff. Well, now it seems like ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips and Brett Yormark from the Big 12 are on board with that 2014. And the SEC is the only league right now that maybe disagrees with that format. So 3 out of 4, I think right now the Big 10 and SEC have to find some sort of common ground for this to work. And based on the AFCA vote from coaches, we're going to a 2014 playoff.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Brad, is from a decision-maker standpoint, it's Big Ten and SEC, obviously. And the Big Ten, I mean, they're in support of it. They introduced it. The SEC, it appears the coaches support it, but the commissioner does not. So it's like everybody's in. There's probably 4 boxes to check. Maybe I'm being overly simplistic here, but coaches and commissioner, and 3 of those 4 checked right now. Is Sankey going to be forced his hand here in his, coming up?
I think he will. And, I mean, from my point of view, if I was Greg Sankey, I would look at the last 15 years and think, we don't need expansion to continue winning national titles. Outside of the last 3 seasons with Ohio State, Michigan, and obviously Indiana last year winning it all, the SEC has dominated college football's postseason. That's changing a little bit in the NIL era. I think college football's best programs now, maybe 4 of the top 5 even, might be in the Big Ten. But from Greg Sankey's POV, I mean, expanding to 24, it takes some of that limelight off the SEC. It gives the Big Ten more bites at the apple. You're going to see maybe 5 or 6 Big Ten teams versus 3 getting in that postseason with the SEC every year. So I think Greg Sankey wants to continue to try and, be the headline of college football, whereas these last 2 or 3 seasons, the SEC starting to sink back a little bit behind the Big Ten.
Brad, you put together the post-spring college football bowl projections where you have every potential bowl matchup in college football playoff. Love this breakdown. You have Texas Tech as the Big 12 representative in the college football playoff. Take us through the process. Who is the next team that you may be considered for the college football playoff, and why is Texas Tech your pick from the Big 12?
Yeah, I think I had Texas Tech as my 7 seed. They were initially a unbeaten projection inside my top 4 back in February, but with this Brendan Sorsby availability issue, we don't know what's going to happen. Is he going to suit up? If not, is Will Hammond fully healthy? He's looked pretty good from these videos I've seen on X here recently, throwing the football at these camps. But Texas Tech is still the front runner to me. They reloaded in the portal, especially up front on the defensive line. When you lose 3 or 4 draft picks, your top pass rushers, you've got to buy guys there. They've got 2 really good studs from Kansas State that I think should fill in. Obviously, Texas Tech's run game is going to be very good too. But if there's some other teams, Houston is a top 20 team in my opinion. I've got Houston number 19 in my preseason, post-spring, top 25. I think Willie Fritz did a good job in the portal. And then, arguably he has the best quarterback room in college football. Nobody's talking about it. Keyshawn Henderson is the top player in the 2026 cycle, and he's behind Connor Weigman, returning starter at quarterback. So I like Houston a lot. Maybe I'm buying the stock price high on the Cougars after winning 10 games last year. But Willie Fritz is a guy that, has done it at multiple programs, and I think he can continue to win big at Houston here the next few seasons.
What is it going to take for the Big 12 to get multiple teams into the playoff?
I think it's going to take multiple 11-plus win teams. We saw last season BYU's 2 losses were to Texas Tech, and they were one of the first teams out. Miami, Notre Dame, BYU kind of fighting for that spot. It does help BYU. They play Notre Dame this season. BYU's another team that if they can get one of those signature non-conference wins against Notre Dame, then maybe they could lose a regular season game in the Big 12. I don't think BYU plays Texas Tech during the regular season, so that could be an issue there where if BYU's first or second loss maybe comes in that Big 12 championship game, if one of those 10 wins during the regular season comes against Notre Dame, the CFP committee likes that. But I think right now the Big 12 is still a 1-bid league because of the strengths right now within the Big Ten and SEC.
And you're spot on, Brad. BYU and Texas Tech do not play this year in the regular season. What would the perception be of the Big 12, or how would it impact the perception of the league if, let's say, BYU did beat Notre Dame?
I think it would be huge. I mean, we saw all the analytics last year were sort of not favoring BYU despite it being one of the most elite, consistent teams all season. If you watch BYU play last year, and they were dominant on both sides of the football, very disciplined football team under Keilani Satake. I mean, the main reason Penn State wanted to swipe that head coach is because of how BYU has looked these last couple of seasons. A very consistent program. I think it'll take more of that this year. BYU playing against Notre Dame is huge. Oklahoma State even has a game against Oregon in the non-conference. Oklahoma State lost by 65 points to the Ducks last year. They make that game respectable and maybe get to 10 wins in the Big 12 under a new head coach, then perhaps the Cowboys are a dark horse team. That's one team, Oklahoma State, that I think is going to be the most improved program in college football. I mean, I know right now there's nowhere to go but up for the Cowboys, but we're talking about a completely overhauled roster and, sort of using the same recipe Kirk Cignetti had in Indiana, where you have a first-year coach bringing a lot of his North Texas guys, studs, by the way, to Stillwater.
That's a really good point. Man, Mestamaker, Caleb Hawkins, Wyatt Young, and it's not just the North Texas guys. Like, they've done really well in the portal outside of that as well. Brad, I also want to note you have an elite helmet game. Like, you've got some sick lids back there behind you. We'll get you some more Big 12 schools in the mix, but what's your favorite?
Favorite helmet is probably Coastal Carolina, man.
Yeah.
I'm digging the ultra-violent teal there, and I know they have the teal turf in Myrtle Beach. I'm only about 90 miles from Myrtle Beach, so it's kind of my home state team.
Awesome, man. Great stuff. Thanks for your time, Brad. Appreciate it, and we hope to have you on again.
Thanks, fellas.
Brad Crawford, college football writer for CBS Sports, has the latest on the college football playoff expansion, how the coaches feel about it, a breakdown of the calendar, also put together a really in-depth piece projecting each and every bowl game, including the college football playoff where he has Texas Tech.
Says it'll take multiple 11-win teams to get multiple bids to the college football playoff for the Big 12. You think that's going to happen?
I think it could. He makes some really spot-on points with the non-conference stuff. BYU against Notre Dame is massive for the league. If BYU wins that game, it changes everything in terms of how many wins those teams need. If Oklahoma State somehow even hangs with Oregon based off of how last year went, that changes everything. And then Arizona State has a huge non-conference game at Texas A&M. Those are the big three. Any of those three go the Big 12's way, and I think the league outlook looks very different. It improves everybody's strength of schedule in the aggregate if you can steal one of those.
And remember, the Big 12 had that opportunity this past year, just didn't pull through. I mean, there were some big-time non-conference games, Cincinnati, Nebraska to open up the season, a few others that
Colorado, Georgia Tech.
Yeah, Baylor, Auburn just did not go the way of the Big 12.
And
Missouri, Kansas.
And last year, the non-conference record against the other power conferences was better than it was the year before. But to your point, the next step is knocking off one of the big dogs in the non-conference. All right, coming up next here on Big 12 Today, we play a little Let's Get It On. We've got topics, we debate, before Brett McMurphy, college football insider with On3, will join us to talk about his post-spring bowl projections and much, much more. Let's get it on after this on Big 12 Radio, brought to you by Modelo, exclusively on TuneIn.